All right, please help me welcome our first speaker who will share their experience, strength, and hope for 10 minutes. Let's welcome John.
Thank you for having me. My name is John. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety birthday is February 4th, 2008, and I'm glad to be here. I was thinking this morning about what am I going to talk about tonight? And so I, share my experience in strength and hope like we do. I was thinking about the struggle of getting sober and coming to, meetings and things. And I kind of didn't have that experience, really. I was, kind of the desire to drink was sort of just taken from me right away. It was kind of strange. And the book talks about that happening. There are rare cases here and there. And, a mental breakdown and a spiritual awakening, there's a fine line. It looks the same, So they threw me in the mental ward for a month just to be safe. But that desire to drink wasn't there, since, and I'm very grateful for that. And sometimes I feel a little weird, maybe a little like a fraud or something when I see someone struggle and they come back and they're fighting, and I think, I'm so weak. I was given a gift. I didn't do anything great to deserve it. I guess, I don't know, it just sort of happened. But as you know, that's not the end that's really the beginning of sobriety. So, though I didn't have that desire to drink, I was crazy. So it took a lot of work, as you guys know. And when I was 23, I went to a sober living. I was living in Kansas at the time. And, when I went there, I didn't think, really, I needed to be there. Like, what could be wrong with me? And I stayed for 4 years because there was quite a bit to untangle. There was that desire to drink wasn't there, but those desires for everything else, went into overdrive. So the self-will run riot that I have manifests itself, in all these other different ways. And that led me to hit bottoms in recovery that were worse than when I was drinking. What's a month in the loony bin? That's not that bad. But some of those emotional bottoms sober, they were that bad. And, I had a particular bottom at 3 years sober. I had the car, the girl, the job, things were going my way, but I wasn't doing the steps. And when I did hit bottom, sober, I called someone that did it with me right. And that really changed my whole sobriety. I didn't quite realize that just not drinking gives you a much better life. There's a lot less stress and all these other things. But to begin to really have a spiritual experience was the difference maker. When people say, that's a long time to live in a sober living, 4 years, it's like, well, 3 of them I was screwing around. I was barely doing what I needed to do to get by. And, the guys would try to take me to meetings and take me places, and I was like a kid in Walmart, just dead weight. I didn't want to do anything. And I would barely, show up. And once I, did what was suggested when I didn't have any other choice, I was going to commit suicide. That's how I felt. That's what made me do the program as it was suggested to me of course, day one, but, I wasn't, doing what was suggested of me. I was just going to meetings and getting by and thinking it was going to work. And it did for a while. But I've had, throughout sobriety, there's been, life's hard, sobriety's hard. And there are a lot of low points that I've had and that I've gone through, and obviously better times, but, during those low spots, like at 3 years, like at, I don't know, it seems like every 3 years or 4 years, there would be some crisis, some spiritual bottom that I would hit, and it would call for more work. And when I'm in, enough pain or frustration, I'll get out the thing, I'll start writing. And I have found that is a solution to do the work, to do a written inventory. And it's saved me multiple times. But I think that the biggest thing that has kept me from, we're always near this edge, it seems like. That's what I've found. That's been my experience. And the thing that has kept me from the edge are the people that I've met, my friends in recovery, and my habits in, going to meetings, the daily readings that I do, and working with other alcoholics. And, I heard somebody, I'm sure you've heard it, we're not all sick on the same day, and I think that's very true. Sometimes I'm not feeling great and someone can help me, or they're not feeling great, and they, we help each other, and trying to stay in the middle of the road, to stay away from that edge, because I've gotten way too close to the edge too many times. So, that has been, it's been dangerous for me to think, I got it going on. I get some chips, and I think, I don't need to go to meetings anymore. I don't need to do my prayer. I start lagging on those habits. And then one day, I'm mad, and I'm full of fear, and I'm flipping off somebody in traffic, or I don't know. It spirals quickly, and that has led me to those bottoms, where, the desire to drink didn't come, but, those are low points where, thank God, somebody has pointed me, maybe you should do the step work, maybe you should, do a little mini inventory or another inventory. So I really love the program, and a lot of these, this process isn't always fun, but I've always found that I felt a lot better, kind of inventorying the soul and getting rid of those things that aren't really me and that separate me from my fellow man. I have 2 minutes. I guess the last thing that I would really say is the next speaker's great. He will do a great job. Dave is my sponsor, and he's been my sponsor for a few years. But one thing about having him as my sponsor is I respect him, and sometimes I'm still pretty ornery and I'm kind of mischievous, And like there are times I think of doing things and I think, no, I don't want to have to tell Dave about this, so I just don't do it. Because I respect him, and so that's helped me grow up a lot. So thank you guys for having me, and I will pass.
All right, let's thank John again for sharing his story with us. We have no dues or fees for a membership. We are fully self-supporting through our own contributions. This self-support includes our rent for this room, the coffee and refreshments, and contributions to intergroup, the area, and general service. While the baskets are being passed, are there any AA announcements? We have literature available to those who need a big book or a 12 and 12. Please see our literature chair. Tyler, I need that, Tyler. I did. If you need any literature or a big book. I would now like to introduce our next speaker who's going to share his experience, strength, and hope until 7:25. I'll give you a 2-minute warning also. Let's welcome Dave.
I'm Dave. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is March 29th, 1978. It wasn't that bad of a day, but it had been a really hard week. Real hard. I took my last drink at McNichols Arena. The Celtics were playing the Nuggets. I didn't know it was going to be my last drink, so when that date became important to me later, I had to call and find out what day did the Celtics play, so I knew what my sobriety date was. But my home group is Bring Your Own Chair, and we meet every morning in Rotary Park in Scottsdale. And a lot of our members are here tonight, and they're my friends, the ones that have helped me stay sober. You know, I'm the oldest of 8 children. My parents were real young when I was born. They were 21. They had 8 kids in 12 years, so they were 33 years old with 8 kids. I think about that sometimes. That's not really possible to think that you could pull that off. And both of them are alcoholics. And we had this, busy house. A lot going on. Everybody had activities and extra people coming and going. And I didn't know that there was anything wrong there. I just thought that's the way people grew up, or the way I lived, whatever. We moved a lot. I thought it was because my dad got a better job. I found out later that the doors were closing and he had to get out of town, so we get to move and go to a new place, and he would start over again. And by the time I was 15, we were living in Missoula, Montana, and you could get a driver's license at 15. And I was the oldest, and there was a lot of tension starting to become very obvious in my house. And I didn't know what it was, but I knew that my parents were struggling badly, that it was uncomfortable a lot of the time. He wasn't there a lot of the time. And so as the oldest, I took it on as my job to straighten everything out. I was going to have a man-to-man talk with my dad, help my siblings get through this stuff that was happening. And I would go at night, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, go downtown, try to find his car, go into the bar where he was and tell him, hey, come on home. He, pushed me away, whatever. And I was kind of my mother's confidant. She was falling apart. I really had this big job, I thought. Though I didn't know how I got it, but I had the job. I went down to see my dad at his office one afternoon. I went to talk to him about it. I wanted to get things straight. And he wouldn't talk to me. He kind of just pushed me away again. In fact, he lied to me about some specific things that I knew that I had overheard. And I just couldn't believe it. I remember thinking about it, that I would never, ever would I treat people that I cared about in that way. Never would I ignore my responsibilities to my family, ever. It could never happen. And I was just so disappointed. I saw his feet of clay. Things were falling apart. And then one of my friend's older brothers bought us a couple cases of beer. And several of us went up into the mountains outside of Missoula and drank that beer, and then went to a dance at the university. And I had a life-changing evening that evening. I had never felt that way before in my life. And I was in this big arena. It was a state high school track and field event. And so there was kids there, from high school kids from all over the state of Montana, hundreds of them. And I just knew everybody was really looking forward to meeting me. And my life opened up, and I was, making the rounds and saying hi. It turns out that I embarrassed my friends. I got asked to leave. I got sick on some people in there, I guess. But I got out of there, and it was kind of late. And I started looking around, and I can't find my car. And I looked everywhere, walked around, couldn't find it. Not a big town. I walked home a couple miles. I got one of my sister's bicycles out of the garage, and I pedaled it around to my friends' houses, thinking I'd find it, couldn't find it. Back to the university, through every parking lot. And finally, about 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm kind of sober, and I have no idea what I'm going to do. I give up on trying. I have to explain at 7 o'clock where the car is to everybody, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but I go home, and when I get there, my car is parked in the driveway. And I'm with you right now. I have no idea how it got there. None. Because I did have one insight into life right there. When you get away with something, don't ask any questions, ever. And I started a new life, a new double life of drinking took over. It's underage drinking is, I call it the James Bond period of drinking, when you have to figure out how to get it, where to hide it, and how to, get away from the cops and the parents and everything. And it was so exciting, and my friends and I were doing it. The adventure was on, and I loved it. And I never spent 30 seconds worrying about my dad or my mother or my siblings. I walked away from that set of responsibilities immediately. And my life just changed. Drinking changed my life, my priorities, my interests, everything changed. I went away to college after that on the East Coast. The drinking age was 18, and I was 18, and I had no authority watching me, and I started immediately, from the first day I got there, drinking every day, every chance I got. And I never stopped doing that until I quit drinking. It had a hold of me from the beginning, and I had to figure out how to live through it in some way. I remember a couple years into the thing, year and a half or 2 years after I'm there, by this time I'm living on a house with some other guys. We'd been in the dormitory the first year, but we had moved out and we're living in a house. And for some reason, our group of friends were invited to this event in a large room, something like this, I suppose. I can't remember why they had it, why we were invited, what it was. I don't know anything about that. I just know that as we were going, it was a big deal to me at the time. And I felt so insecure and out of place. I got there, and as I got into the room, in the back corner, there was a bar. I went and had a drink quickly, had my next drink in my hand. I was starting to drink it, and I had this feeling come over me, this sensation, insight into myself, that this is going to be okay now. A couple of drinks straightens everything out. And I had a realization about myself that I said, I'm the kind of guy that has to have a couple drinks in order to do things like this, to go to places I'm unfamiliar with, or to meet people I don't know, or to do new things, whatever. I need a drink or two, a couple of drinks, and then I'm fine. My life challenge is I got to figure out how to do that and not overdo it. Just find that spot, just enough so you're comfortable, having fun, but don't overdo it. And that's it's a wonderful knowledge to have of yourself. Not particularly helpful in my case, anyway. Didn't work that night. I was again asked to leave. Got into a tussle with somebody and embarrassed my friends and whatever. But at least I knew what my life was supposed to be like going forward. I managed to keep going long enough to graduate from college. I stayed around there another year or so, waiting to find out what was going to happen to me with the draft, and had a job working as a bartender, and I had all my friends were living the same life I was living. I thought it was the kind of life I wanted to live, really. But I finally got some of that straightened out. I moved back to the West, back to where my family lived by then in Albuquerque. And as I left, I had embarrassed myself a little bit more with some people, and I knew that I would never, ever be able to go back there again. That I was sure of. I was leaving that, and I was gone for good. But I go to Albuquerque, and pretty soon I have a job. And it doesn't take very long for I recognize these people, these guys I'm working with at this place, they're the same guys I left back on the East Coast. Just different names, but they have the same interests, the same thing. And I'm back into the same life, same type of behavior, same everything, almost immediately. And again, although I knew there was something different about me and I had to learn how to do it better, I expected I would someday, when my life situation changed or I had a new set of responsibilities or whatever, I would handle them. And I would handle this eventually. It just wasn't time for that yet. And I was working at this place, and I was sharing an apartment with one of my brothers. And every morning I had to be down at work at 8:15 for a sales meeting that started, and it was a religion at this place that I worked. You have to be there on time in your chair when it starts every day. And I lived about 20 minutes away, and every morning I'm getting up and I'm rushing to get ready to go, and I usually give myself maybe 17, 18 minutes to get there for a 20-minute drive and be upstairs in my chair. And it was a close call, but I usually made it. And I'm coming out of my apartment to go down to leave for work, and when I get there, looking at this car, and my car is completely wrecked. I mean, smashed in, mud and weeds up in the wheel wells, and the hood's crinkled in, and the grill's smashed in. I'm looking at it thinking, what's going on here? How did this happen? I don't remember anything about this. And I quickly reviewing in my head, where did I go after work? How did I get home? What time did I get here? And it was blurry, but I thought, if I did this, I know I would remember it, but I don't remember it exactly. And then instantly I figured out it's my brother. I got home, and my brother must have taken that car and wrecked it and came back. I mean, and I went and rousted him out of bed and accused him of it, and he denied it. And so I had to call my boss, and it wasn't my car; it was a company car. And I called my boss, and I can't remember even what story. I worked out of it. It came out okay. I had a new car by the end of the day, I think, and off to whatever the next step was. But my brother is dead now from drinking, and he was in and out of AA for a long time, 30 years probably. And I took him to treatment a bunch, and we did various things together in AA, and he never really got a hold of it. But during one of his periods of sobriety, we talked about that. I asked him, did you do that or did you not do it? And he said, well, honestly, I don't remember. I might have. We don't know. So we agreed that we would have a joint blackout. One of us did it for sure, I think, but I don't know. We have no idea how that worked itself out. But, things weren't going that great. And I was lying to myself and pretending they were, and pretending I was living the life I wanted to live, all this sort of stuff. And ended up, my family moves to Portland, Oregon. And I go up there. My dad got an opportunity to buy a business up there, and I was working for him. A couple of my brothers were working there. And we were struggling. That business struggled badly. It was during a period of economic upheaval, which I like to see I think might have contributed to it, but it could be that we were all drunk too. That might be part of it. But while we were there, after we were there a period of time, this man named Don G. from Rapid City, South Dakota, who grew up with my parents, lived on the same block with my dad since they were first graders. They went to school together. They joined the Navy together in World War II. They were almost brothers. They did a bunch of stuff together. Well, this man got badly in trouble with drinking in his 20s, walked away from his family, his marriage, a business, went to Minneapolis, was living on the streets there. Terrible, horrible drunk story. Everybody in our little town up there in South Dakota knew about him, knew about what had happened. And he gets sober in AA in Minneapolis. And he moves back to South Dakota. And he puts together a few months of sobriety and a couple of dollars and flies to Oregon to bring the good news, the gospel of Alcoholics Anonymous to his old friend, my dad. And he gets there to tell him about what had happened and what the story was with AA. And of course, at this point, my dad's an alcoholic, dead from drinking now, but hadn't really caught up to him the same way it did his friend, and he was still on the outside looking pretty good a lot of the time. And he wouldn't even sit down and talk to this guy, wouldn't let him be alone with him. He didn't want to hear it, would have nothing to do with it. But the man took my brother and myself, and he had enough leverage to put us down in a chair and tell us his story. He told us exactly what happened to him, and what it was like, and what it was like now, and he explained so many things, and he told us stories of his early drinking. A lot of it included incidents that my father was involved in that I'd never heard of before. But we listened to him. And as soon as we could get away from him, we got quickly and far away and just made fun of him. I mean, are you kidding me? Did you hear what that guy said? And it had nothing to do with me. But something was put in my brain that day. And it was the beginning of a change that eventually finally took place for my benefit. But that guy opened a door to me and to my family that alcoholism, what we've been talking about, what the problem's been in my family forever, for generations really, is alcoholism. And I never thought about that was what the problem was. Control your drinking, maybe. Behave better while drunk. I would like to do that if I could. And but I just don't do that very well. Anyway, he then, because of his visit, my mother, of course, immediately jumps both feet into Al-Anon. There's treatment centers there. She's going there, getting information, trying to force it into everybody in my family. Read this is what it is what we're going to do, all this stuff. And, about that time, our business went kaput. I left all of them in Oregon and moved to Colorado, but I left with a pamphlet from a treatment center that was describing what alcoholism was. It's an inability to control your drinking. I mean, they were pretty straightforward about that's what the deal is. But this treatment center pamphlet said, if you have the ability to control your drinking, then you're not an alcoholic. So if you can pick out an established number of drinks to have every day and have that many and no more than that for 90 days, your point's proven you're not an alcoholic. So I decided that I would take the test to prove that I wasn't. And you get to pick any number you like. So I say 5 drinks a day. And I understand that still a non-alcoholic person considers that to be a sizable number of drinks to have in a day. It seems like a very modest amount to me. And but it's an awkward number, too, because I drink whatever's available, but I like to drink beer every day. And you're going to go and buy a 6-pack, come home, drink 5, and save 1 till tomorrow. I didn't do that, and I don't know if you guys did or not, but I didn't. And so I had to, for the 90 days, I had to change. I switched over to wine. I was buying gallons of cheap wine and drinking 5 iced tea glasses of wine a day. And I did it for 90 days. I passed the test. I'm not an alcoholic. Now, a couple of those days, at the end of the 5th one or so, I lost count. I usually gave myself the benefit of the doubt on that one, but I was stringent about passing that test. So now here I am. I've been trying to control my drinking for a long time, or trying to do drinking differently or behave differently or something, and now I've taken this test and I'm okay, but I'm not okay. I'm having, I get a drinking and driving arrest after a little while. Got out of that, and then 6 months later, I get arrested again. And the first time, I got out on a technicality. They had screwed up the paperwork. And the judge knew that I was guilty, and he was mad at the DA's office and the police for not getting it straight. And he gave me a warning, don't ever come back in front of me again, because if you do, I'm going to take full advantage of that opportunity and take care of both problems that day. And so I knew that I was never do it. I mean, I obviously am never going to drink again in Boulder County. That's it. I mean, how crazy do you think I am, And so 6 months later, I'm at work. It's about 8 o'clock. We're going to close up in a little bit. So a couple of friends of mine called me, invited me to come over to their house after work. They're going to barbecue steak, and we'll just have a beer or a glass of wine or something. Have a nice meal, nice visit. Sounds wonderful. Very adult, mature way to live. And I said, no, thank you. I can't do it. I got to be at work early in the morning. I'll catch you next time or whatever. So I hang up with that, and about 3 or 4 minutes later, I get another call. This guy's at this bar 40 miles away. Pick it up. You can hear the music, the laughing, the jacking around. The guy says, hey, man, come on over. You're late. Get over here. And I said, I'll be right there. So I drive the 40 miles. I stay till they close. I'm driving home, and it's a pretty long drive. I'm almost home. I'm within a mile of the house when I get pulled over. I've always felt that was unfair, really, when you think about it. And then I didn't know this until I got to the pretrial conference later, reading the police report with the assistant DA, and he says the officer was going to do a roadside sobriety test, and when he opened the door to get me out, that I fell out and landed on the pavement. And it says right in the report that he did not do a roadside test. Took me right to jail. And so my rights were abridged then. No due process was done there for sure. But there I am. I'm going back to court now. And so a couple days later, I go to a ball game and I have my last drinks. And then the next day, I go and see this guy. It was in AA. And I knew him because I'd helped some of the guys that I worked with go to him because they had drinking problems over the years. And I went and talked to him, and he talked to me about, you might have this alcoholism problem. I'm not saying you do, but you might. And he gave me a big book, and he gave me a meeting list, and he asked me to try not drinking, go to meetings, read this book, come back and see him in a week, and let's talk about how things are going. I thought, oh, God, okay. And I took it. The next day I went to my first meeting, and I went 2 towns away. I didn't want to see anybody. I waited till it started outside in my car, and then I went right in, sat in the back. The second it was over, gone. Didn't talk to anybody. Had no idea what anybody said. Didn't know anybody there. I thought. The next day, I'm at work. A guy that I'd been working with for 4 or 5 years, that I knew well. I played softball with him. I went to ball games with him. We played cards together. Went to the dog track. I mean, we did all these drinking things. I thought he was drinking. Turns out he'd been AA for 18 years. He did all that stuff without drinking. I never noticed that he wasn't drinking. He comes into my office, and he said to me, are you trying to stop drinking? And I looked at him and I couldn't figure out, what are you talking about? Why would you ask me that? How do you know? All that sort of stuff. Well, he'd been watching me, and he had guys in that meeting that told him I was there. I found that out later. But usually I would lie if somebody asked me my drinking. But I said, yes, I am going to try to stop. And he said, are you going to go to the meetings? And again, I found that a shocking question to ask me. But I said yes. And he said, great, we'll go together. And I just couldn't believe it, really. Here's a guy, I liked this guy. I knew him well, I thought. And I didn't ever expect I'd come to AA and find people I wanted to hang around with or like. I just thought it was punishment. They caught you, and now you got to do this. I mean, that's what I thought happened. And so we started going. And we went a lot, and he invited me to his house, he introduced me to his family. We went a lot of places together. First 6 months, we went to golf tournaments and baseball games and all kinds of stuff. Same stuff we did before, maybe, but without drinking. And he showed me a way to live a life without drinking. I couldn't believe it. And so I get about 6 months sober, and I'm opening up. I'm figuring out the situation that I'm in. My parents had got divorced finally after about 30 years. My youngest brother was still in high school, had a sister in college, had another younger sister that had just got married, had a 1-year-old, her husband was in college, and they were all living in a house that I owned. And I had somehow I put together this situation that I was responsible for, and I didn't know how to get it, and I realized, and I just ignored it before, but now I realize I'm getting sober. I don't want to live in this house with these people anymore, but I don't know how to get out of it. Because everybody's kind of relying on me and on living there. And I'm talking to my friend Ray about it, and he said, well, in your case, you just need to go to meetings, not drink, go to work, pay your bills, and, say your prayers, and things will work themselves out. And we'll go to a ball game tomorrow. Anyways, whatever. So comes Christmas, and I'm sober about 9 months. We go to San Diego to the Cabrillo Classic, which is a college holiday basketball tournament. They had like 10 teams, they had games all day long, 10, 12 games a day. And this was before the internet and before cell phones were prevalent. So we're gone all day to basketball games. Get home to our hotel about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and there was about 15 of these pink message slips shoved under my door. Urgent. Call your mother. Call your brother. And I'm, oh my God, what happened here, whatever. So I call, of course, and get him on the phone, and it turns out my brother and my brother-in-law had burned my house down. And they said, you got to come right home. I said, well, I tell Ray, he said, no, we don't have to let them deal with it. We'll watch basketball for a few more days. So by the time I got back 3 or 4 days later, they all had moved. I mean, they had to. They had to go somewhere. And the insurance claim was started, and it took months to settle that. And everybody was split up on their way gone. I didn't know how to get out of that deal, but a miracle took place. God burned my house down so that I could move on. I didn't recognize it as a miracle for a while, but I do now, for sure. So I'm sober a little while. I got a couple of friends. I'm going to a lot of meetings. I'm starting to see my life is changing. And then another guy I knew invited me to go to a men's big book workshop group, Golden Slippers they called it up there, where we met every week. 16 men did it together at somebody's house. We read the big book out loud together, slowly. Every time we got to a word we didn't understand, we'd look it up in a dictionary. When we got to an instruction, we did what it said to do. When we got to an idea, we discussed it till everybody understood it, and we did the steps together. We worked our way through the steps. which I up to that point hadn't really done. I'd read the book plenty, but it was way different when we read it out loud and talked about it and actually did the steps. And I was thinking that it was maybe a few weeks after I had done my 5th step and I was through 6 and 7 and kind of starting my amends. And I had an appointment for my work on the far side of Denver, a place where I'd never been. And I got over there early for the appointment. And I had enough time. I had a meeting list, and I looked up if there's an AA meeting. It turns out there was a club right there. They had a noon meeting. It was just ready to start. I had time to go to that meeting before my business appointment. And I went to the meeting. It was a group, this size, something like that. Nice, big, solid group of people. And I'm in the meeting for a while, and it's going on for 10 or 15 minutes maybe. And the feeling comes over me. I can feel it right now. This is okay. I'm glad to be here. I know what they're doing. If it calls on me, I might be able to say something. I feel comfortable with this group of people without drinking. I reflect back to my younger self when I knew I couldn't ever meet new people or go new places without drinking. And I realized a major change. I'm not the same person. Something happened. And the only thing I knew for sure that happened was I quit drinking and started going to AA and sincerely tried to do the steps. And the change happened to me. And I feel like that's when I really joined Alcoholics Anonymous in my mind. And I had then a few years of meeting people, going to meetings, feeling part of it. That's all really nice little period of time in my life. And then about 34 years ago, I was at a Friday night meeting, and my wife, Connie, came into that meeting. She was traveling. She was from Tucson, and she was there for work. She'd called, found a meeting, and came in and attended that meeting. And I felt a sense of responsibility as a home group member to invite her out for coffee, welcome her to our meeting. And she agreed to go. We went for a really nice long coffee together, and then the next day we had lunch, and then she went back to Tucson. And that was almost 34 years ago, and in a couple of weeks we'll be married 33 years. And it happened. It was one of the best meetings I ever went to. Great meeting. But she moved to Colorado Springs. We blended some children and made a family of 6 children. We lived there for over 20 years, 22, 23 years, going to work, having AA be a center part of our life, meetings in our house, committed to home group, have a sponsor people. AA, really wonderful part of our life, had a great life. We had all these kids. Well, that means you're going to have lots of ups and downs. We had kids that won awards, and we had kids that got arrested, and they got accepted to premier colleges and got bounced out of horrible colleges. We had everything that you could have, and but we stayed sober and we raised our children. And 11 years ago, business had changed some. The kids were grown up, and we came down here to Arizona for a long vacation that we could pull off finally. We'd had Connie's dad had moved there. We were keeping an eye on him. He had passed away this fall before, so we've kind of had a clear shot finally to go do something. And we came to Arizona for a couple months. When we were down here, we didn't really know anybody. A couple of people we knew a little bit, but not really too much. But one person who referred us to another friend, and they took us to to the No Sniveling meeting, which meets every day in Scottsdale. And we kind of fell in love with that group. And we fell in love with AA in Arizona. And we kind of liked the weather and a lot of other things that were real nice. So we said, well, we were never going to do this, but maybe we could live two places. We'll buy a house and we'll live here. So we did that. And then within a year and a half, we decided Colorado's done. We're here all the time. So we've been here 11 years. And we've got a fellowship that's grown up around us. Home group, go to a meeting every day, read the book, have friends, many of whom are here tonight, thankfully. Excuse me. And AA has continued to be the center part of my life and our family life. Excuse me. About 2.5 years ago, our oldest son, Jason, was killed in a motorcycle accident. He had put together 15 years in AA, but he had relapsed. We weren't really aware of how far that this problem had gone in his life. Because, he's an alcoholic, he kind of kept things to himself. That's what I did, that's what he did. But he had a lot of trouble. He got sober, he was sober a long time, he's real active. And then he fell away from the meetings. Got involved in some other stuff, had a relapse, and had an accident on his motorcycle where he was killed in that accident. Or a couple of days later, they had to take him off life support. And what happened? Well, Alcoholics Anonymous surrounded us, came to our home for meetings, were there for my wife every day as she tried to process losing her child. And we just kept going to AA. Is that ever going to make it good? No. But does it change? Yes. And do you understand? I understand better today how important it is, how critical it has to be to maintain my connection to Alcoholics Anonymous. It doesn't make any difference who you are, what happens. The threat is there, period. Earlier this month, the 5th of March, our daughter Katie celebrated 2 years clean and sober in NA and AA. She tested my faith that there's a miracle available for her. Her mother and I watched her first step very closely for a long time, and I didn't know if it was possible. She was on the streets in Phoenix, and this is one of the girls that was accepted to one of the premier universities in the United States as in a very small program for musical theater. Unbelievably talented, and all this was gone. So she celebrates 2 years. She invites us to the meeting. It's an NA meeting that we went to early this month. In NA, they give you a keychain instead of a coin. So she's getting her keychain. We go to this meeting. It's a nice group, large group, boisterous, having fun, laughing, joking, lots of fellowship, lots of enthusiasm, plenty of seasoned members, a few newcomers. Everybody knows each other. They're there to help each other. It's a wonderful thing to see and watch. They all knew her. They recognized what had happened in 2 years to her, how great it was. They were reading in their format something from their literature, and I don't know their literature. I'm a visitor to NA, but they read it in their format at the meeting I went to. Excuse me. And it said, I loved it. It was so simple and beautiful. But it said, the most important thing about the steps of recovery is the fact that they work. They work. And I thought about that a lot. And I know that's what I love about the promises in our literature, in our meetings. There actually is a simple, effective way to get help for me and for all of us. Thank you.
right. I've now asked Larry to read a portion of Keys to the Kingdom.
Larry, alcoholic. The last 15 years of my life have been rich and meaningful. I've had a share of my problems. I've had a share of problems. Heartaches and disappointments, because that is life. But also I've known a great deal of joy and peace. That is handmaiden of an inner freedom. I have a wealth of friends, and with my AA friends, an unusual quality of fellowship. For these people, I am truly related. First through mutual pain and despair, and later through mutual objectives and newfound faith and hope. And as the years go by, working together, sharing our experience with one another, and also a mutual trust, understanding, and love without strings, without obligations, we acquire relationships that are unique and priceless. There is no more aloneness, with that awful ache so deep in the heart of every alcoholic that nothing before could ever reach it. That ache is gone and never return again, need never return again. Now there is a sense of belonging and of being wanted and needed and loved. In return for the bottle and hangover, we have been given the keys to the kingdom.